YouTube, so folks will be able to follow along on World Lacrosse's YouTube page. This is for the actual Zoom calls for delegate and observers again. So if you aren't a delegate or an observer, so folks that was registered, follow along on World Lacrosse's YouTube page. Sorry about that. That was in the background. So if you're not a registered delegate or observer, if you could please jump off this Zoom and follow along through the YouTube that is now activated, we'd appreciate that, just to limit the amount of traffic that we have on the official General Assembly Zoom. Again, if you've got a question or a comment, we'd ask you to unmute yourself and ask those questions at that point in time. Let's use the chat for more of the administrative type issues. If you're having an issue, you're not receiving your ballots, please use the chat. Those types of issues, I guess it was last year, we got a bit too much traffic in the chat and it was difficult for people to follow along. So if you've got a question or comment on a piece of legislation that we're discussing, please simply unmute yourself at that appropriate time, and we'll address questions that way, a bit more personal, a bit more easier for people to follow along. Last thing I'll announce is timing. We've kind of gone through and we've had some general timing that we've allocated for each section. We're going to try and keep to that timing. So when you are speaking about a particular topic, if you try and limit yourself to brief comments, if the comment's already been made, don't feel like you need to come back and repeat that comment. We want to give as many people the opportunity to speak as possible, and we want to give as many diverse opinions that are out there to have the opportunity to speak as well. So we're going to try and keep the conversation pretty concise and try and stay to that timing, respecting all of your time, understanding that this may not be at the most convenient time, depending where you are in this world. So we want to make sure we do the best job we can to respect your time. So let's try and keep the communication flowing, and both Sue and Sally will try and keep us on task as we work through the various agenda items and get through what we need to get through today. So with that said, it is my pleasure to turn it over to our president, Sue Redfern, to give her welcome, and then we'll work through the rest of our agenda. So thank you again for being here. Welcome, and Sue, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eric. And welcome to everybody to day 2 of our General Assembly. And thank you for all the work, all the feedback, all the interactions we've had through webinars, roadshows, individual conversations since the day 1 of the GA. It's been really helpful and really appreciated by us in World Lacrosse. And in particular, one piece of feedback was about how we voted on amendments on day 1. And so if we could have that slide up, please, Evan.
Next slide, Evan.
Okay, we took an amendment on day 1, and we thought what we should have done is to vote on the amendment and then vote on the motion, make that, because it passed as an amendment, then make it the permanent motion. What we did in reality was to conflate both activities, and you only was asked to vote once. A number of people have picked that up after the GA. And so we looked at, under Robert's Rules, Procedures and Guidance, what should we do about a mistake that's been made in a technical procedure. And further investigations tell us that as no point of order was raised by anybody on the day 1 assembly before we moved on to the next business, that we should simply move on and accept that this was a mistake. But because of the overwhelming vote in favour of the amendment, and actually the motion as we put it on the day, that it should stand as a substantive vote. Because in reality, with a vote with that number of passes on an amendment, the motion was most likely to pass anyway. And so it becomes perhaps irrelevant. However, it is confusing. We wanted to highlight it to you that we recognised we had been confusing. I accept total responsibility for that and will endeavour to get it right going forwards. And will appreciate any of you raising a point of order if another amendment goes through incorrectly. But that being said, unless anybody wants to raise an objection, we would like to follow the guidance that we've established in the intervening weeks and let that motion and vote stand. So does anybody want to raise anything? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Eric, are you seeing anything?
I am not.
Okay, in that case, Sally, I invite you to go on to the next item on the confirming of the agenda.
Thank you, Sue. And I would like to add my welcome to day 2 of the General Assembly as well. In terms of the agenda and following feedback again, we would like to move the future of the General Assembly's paper, which is currently agenda item 5.2, to before the discussion on World Lacrosse Handbook, which is the next agenda item. So it would become the next agenda item. And there are obvious links between the 2 agenda items, and the governance changes are then happening all at one time. If you agree to this action taking place, it will mean that we will add in an additional short break in the agenda between the handbook discussion and the finance section. Finally, we would like to take agenda items 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4 in one go when we come to that part of the finances of the agenda, but each item will be discussed separately. So can I have your feedback on these proposed changes? And if you're all happy with them, I'll ask Sue to ask for a show of hands.
Could we remove the current slide, please, Evan, because it's not about what Sally's talking about.
So
Thank you.
You could just stop sharing for the moment. That'll make it easier to count. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you very much.
No comments then, Sue, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, no comments. Okay, could we have a show? Could we have a show of hands? We discussed earlier with a show of hands. It's quite difficult to work out here who is an observer and who is a delegate when you raise your hands. And so we have 2 options. We're going to propose the first option, which is that we ask those who are against changing the agenda. Sorry, could you take your hands down, please? You haven't been asked to put them up yet.
Appreciate the eagerness, though.
So we're proposing to you that we take those who are against Sally's proposal of changing the agenda. So anybody who is against changing the agenda.
Not seeing any.
Okay. Anybody who wishes to abstain from changing the agenda. Okay, and then we will take everybody else nobody's raised their hands on either item. Everybody is unanimously in favour of changing the agenda. That's okay. Thank you very much, Sally. Is there anything else on the agenda, Sally, before we move on?
No, that's all. Thank you, Sue.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on then to the future of the GAs, and because this is a paper that I wrote in the first place, and I'm proposing the motion.
Evan,
Steve,
could you just share the presentation again, please?
Steve will then, as Vice President, chair the subsequent discussion once I put the motion, make my introduction. So could we have the motion up that we're going to be putting? I think it probably is the next slide.
Yep.
Okay. We never planned to have virtual GAs, and the COVID required us to do that last year and this year. It's been evident that we've had far more people in attendance at the GAs who are, I'm going to put in inverted commas, the right people, the officers of the organisation, because you don't have to be involved in travel expenses if you're not doing anything with your team at the event. So we have presented a paper which looks at what could we do as an alternative. We've received from ELF between the meetings a friendly amendment which we've put on screen, and as the proposer I'm happy to accept the friendly amendment as being part of the motion that we're going to work with, so that the exception of every 3rd year would be a face-to-face General Assembly. The benefit of every 3 years face-to-face is that, assuming the proposed calendar is voted on later, we would cover an 11-year period. We would be able to hold a face-to-face GA meeting in every one of our events if we chose to do so, starting in Towson next year. If we go to every 2-year face-to-face schedule, which is what we used to have, it will always favour one gender event rather than the other. So if we started in Towson next year, then it would be women's events most of the time thereafter. You could argue that when we started in 2008 until 2016, it was favouring men's events. But we don't really want to be there. We'd much rather be able to alternate between all of our events for you all. So the current proposal is to hold a face-to-face meeting in 2022, and then 2 virtual GAs, and then a face-to-face meeting in 2025. I would say that at this moment, the face-to-face meetings, there will be face-to-face meetings in every world event. They would be more town hall meetings, roadshow meetings, something on a specific important topic that either members wish to talk about or we wanted to talk with you about. And so the intent would be that we would still have shared face-to-face discussion, which we all value at all of our world events. So they'd be focused differently at each event, and they wouldn't involve voting. So we anticipate that they would just address the important topics we all really want to talk about, rather than necessarily so much time on GA business. Potentially also at those town hall type meetings, we can have a wider range of stakeholders as well as the official representatives of the NGBs. We've had suggestions in between the meetings that we should move to hybrid GAs. And at this time, we believe for a number of reasons, this creates more problems for us than it solves. But it is something that World Lacrosse should continue to look at and assess as we move forward with future hosts and with technology developments. But at this time, our reservations include, firstly, it may inhibit future hosts putting themselves forward if we require it and mandate it because of limitations on venues for a GA. In our experience to date, most of the venues we've held GAs in, generally hotels, have had very limited bandwidth, and any attempts by us to request enhanced bandwidth or high-speed access, even for the delegates in the room or ourselves, has been cost prohibitive, and so we haven't gone ahead with it, even if the hotel was prepared to consider it and could guarantee it. In addition to increased bandwidth, the venue would also have to have the ability for loudspeakers that would enable everyone participating from afar to be easily heard. The technology is clearly around. The question is whether we can afford to put that technology into a room for a 2-day meeting. Many of us have also participated in hybrid events where everyone has tried to hear through one laptop, which just doesn't work, and or where technology presentation failures have occurred at vital moments. And that's even within quite high level meetings beyond our resource capacity. The technology and the costs will clearly improve over time. And most venues will probably get better internet access over time. But at the moment, it doesn't seem right to us to commit World Lacrosse to trying to go for hybrid meetings every year at this moment in our history. And I'd point out that it would be easy to say that we just go for increased costs and bear them. But in reality, that means all of you bearing them, because money for GAs needs to come through our subscription basis or our events base. Not something that our donor should be paying for, because it's normal business for us as an organisation. It may reduce the reasons for the right people to be present at the face-to-face GA. And I think we all accept that having the right people, the officers of each NGB, is actually very important, because then we get continuity of thinking, continuity of debate. Having said that, we do really appreciate the opportunity to meet face-to-face and talk between meetings. So whilst recognising why the suggestion for hybrid meetings is made, it's our response at this time that we should continue to monitor it, to investigate the potential with future hosts every 3 years, and to get some experience with it before committing to it and then not being able to do it. Don't like us setting ourselves up to fail, and I fear that's what we might do. So that being said, I will put the motion on the table, seconded by Sally. So we have the original motion to accept that World Lacrosse GA should be held virtually in the future, or a friendly friendly amendment that I'm happy to accept to replace my original motion, to accept that the World Lacrosse GA should be held virtually in the future, with the exception of every 3rd year, which will be held in person at a World Lacrosse Championship. So with that said, Steve, over to you to take questions, please.
Thank you, Sue. Good morning, all. Any questions or comments about either of these options?
I do. I've got my hand up, Steve, if I can.
Sure, Pauls, go ahead.
Would it be possible to hold a hybrid event every 3 years rather than every year? Would that make sense? You know, because the technology is advancing rapidly, the costs are coming down, and it would just it would expand the membership for the potential membership for the face-to-face meetings.
Everybody
Sue?
understand that point? So rather than, I think what you're suggesting, Pauls, is rather than requiring in person, that we would offer a hybrid option if you could not attend in person, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Steph?
I could, if it's okay with you, I'll put it forward in chat.
Sure. Steph?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for considering ELF's proposal. I think we also included that perhaps World Lacrosse could free up some budget on that third year to allow NGB participants that may not otherwise be able to afford it. I realize that's maybe not part of this direct thing, but something that we had asked World Lacrosse to consider to kind of ensure that, you know, it wasn't just the wealthier NGBs and CFs that would be in attendance in those cases.
So just a clarification, Steph, appreciate that point. Would that, would the option of a hybrid every third year address that issue?
Yes, and I think it would also be more environmentally sustainable. So I think, yeah, having a hybrid event, just making sure that as many people can attend as possible was the kind of motivation behind it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for that clarification.
May I ask a question real quick?
No, could you put your hand up, please, if you wish, and we'll go through in the order if you don't mind, Patrick. Appreciate it. Costa Rica, question or comment?
Yes, well, because to me, the amendment is doing just in the case that we met each other in every lacrosse world championship when it will be with all the teams. But right now, well, we're done having an 80-team world championship, so there is no teams that will be attending. So it's better to have like a mixed model, maybe in the room the teams attending and in a virtual way the other teams.
Okay, so just to clarify, Costa Rica, it seems like you're supporting Paul's recommendation for a hybrid option every third year. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, appreciate that. Mike Slattery.
Thanks, Steve. I think the alternative of a third year is excellent, but could you please include when that would start from? Because I think that is an important milestone that should be recorded in this proposal.
Okay, Sue, do you want to clarify that in terms of proposal to start the every third year calendar?
As I said earlier, the intent is to start in 2022, where we already have a venue booked in Towson. Whether it can take a hybrid arrangements is another question, but the intent would be to start in 2022.
Thanks, Sue.
So, Sue, could we include that in that alternative proposal starting from 2022?
Yes, we could. Eric,
Okay,
could you add those words in, please? After World Lacrosse Championship, starting in from 2022.
While Eric's doing that, Patrick, you have your hand up, sir.
Yes, so it's my understanding that you were talking about having every third year is during a championship. Everybody's going to be there for those games, correct? So it seems
well, no, not necessarily. The attendance at a world championship is currently limited to 30 members.
Okay,
for the seniors, and it may, based on our votes later today, that may change a bit more as well. So not necessarily.
Okay, answers my question. Thanks.
Sure. Mason,
Yes, my observer has a question, just asking permission to yield my time to Carrie.
That's
of
fine,
course.
thank you.
Carrie?
Hiya. I was just wondering if there was a possibility of a kind of middle ground, if it was possible to have virtual 1 year, in person, a second year, and hybrid the third year, assuming that on that year the host nation was able to provide the hybrid option. Because I take your point, I take the things that you're saying about the bandwidth and the costs for running a hybrid meeting, but if that host nation was able to provide that, could we run with all three options on a 3-year rotation?
okay, another suggestion on a variation of the proposal to go on a 3-year cycle with in-person, virtual, and hybrid as the 3-year cycle.
So essentially, we're having 2 in person every 3 years is what that would do, because obviously have in person for the in person, you'd have in person for the hybrid as well. So we'd be changing that fundamentally.
I would say it is possible, and it's a reasonable suggestion, but to Eric's point and to some of the other points, it does then perhaps put some strain, pressure, et cetera, on those who either attending competing in a world championship, and or those who may not be able to afford, or be very difficult for them to afford, as Eric suggests, the 2, or at least the second, but in-person option relative to the hybrid proposal. So a reasonable suggestion, and I thank you for sharing it.
Steve,
other comments?
Sorry, Steve, could I add something?
Sure.
If we went with Carrie's proposal for every 2 years, that is going to cause us problems because we don't know who the future hosts are. So we're committing ourselves to something in a boat here of a virtual. If we change it to the virtual every 3 years, we're committing ourselves to something we don't know that we can actually establish. We can aim to do, but we can't actually necessarily guarantee it. That's the problem with the virtual at this moment, because
we
don't
have to incorporate it into
we still
requirements.
We would have to pay for it, not the host, and therefore it's a cost we would have to bear if we require it every 3 years, and we may not be able to afford to do that.
Or could it be a virtual, an in-person, and a hybrid if at all possible? So there's the caveat that it's a virtual or a hybrid if at all possible. So there's flexibility either way for the host nation to hold it if they can, but there's a possibility to be virtual if it can't.
Okay, thank you for that. So giving some flexibility in the proposal to allow us to back off from one or either of those options, depending on what the circumstances are in the host country. Appreciate that.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Yes,
the face-to-face is the one that would be hybrid. Therefore, if I understood Carrie right, we would change it from a face-to-face meeting to a virtual meeting if we couldn't provide hybrid facilities. So we wouldn't be going for a face-to-face every 3 years under that proposal, as I understand it.
No, there would be a face-to-face every 3 years.
Okay.
Be a virtual every 3 years. It would be the other one would be the in-between, would be a virtual, or it would be a virtual or a hybrid. So that would either be a face-to-face, a hybrid, or a fully virtual, depending on the host nation and the circumstances that could be provided that year. So there's a definite virtual, a definite virtual, a definite face-to-face, and what the host nation is able to provide for us in that year.
Okay.
right. So the third, right, we have an in-person, definitely, a virtual, definitely, and then the third in a cycle, the hybrid, would be one or the other based on logistics of the host.
Yes.
Uganda.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. I in representation of Uganda, I think we agree with the idea of the virtual GA after the 3 years, because it will be easier for us to attend. And I believe a couple of members coming up, they're all constrained sometimes with the resources. So I think new members, especially in Africa, will also have an advantage of being able to attend the GA. As Uganda, we agree with the idea. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Edwin, Hong Kong.
Okay, thank you. Just some information for everyone. I think the discussions, the idea is brilliant. Because I'm working on the technology side, so I just share to everyone that the cost in holding hybrid event is, I would say, very expensive, because we have to make sure the connectivities, the everyone from virtuals can be response almost real time. Yeah, it will maybe several $100,000 events, okay, to holding this up. Of course, for each country, it will save some money on travel and accommodations. But I would suggest World Across really need to do a good cost and benefit analysis for this one, because it's not something small spending like this event. So yeah, I of course appreciate it could be a hybrid, okay, but the cost of hybrid is not is a big amount of money, not a small one. So when making the decision, should be careful. Yeah, that's the point I want to share. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Edwin. So an emphasis on the concern about, as Sue pointed out, the relative cost of hosting a hybrid event. Paul's.
Yeah, based on what Edwin just said, I'll call back my proposal and with the option to put it forward when the costs come down next year, the following year. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pauls. We can always revisit this in the years to come, depending on circumstances, that's for sure. So any other comments or questions about either of those motions? It certainly appears that the alternative proposed friendly amendment seems to be of the preference of most members. There was a clarification that we add, as I think may have been done starting in 2022. Has that been done?
Yes,
It
has been done.
It's not showing.
It's just not showing.
I've done it in the vote.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate that. So are there any other comments? First of all, let me perhaps ask, maybe by maybe this is the best way to do it, a show of hands as to if we can push the alternative proposed friendly amendment forward for a vote over the originally submitted motion. It seems like that second motion is overwhelmingly supported by the comments we've received. Could I ask for a show of hands of support to take the alternative proposed friendly amendment to a vote?
Yeah, if we could do it the same way we did it before, maybe just say if anyone's against doing that, and we could count that a little easier.
Okay, sorry about that. Let's do that. Raise your hand. Apologies. Thank you, Eric. If you are against the proposal to move the alternative proposed friendly amendment forward for a vote. So Mike, you're against moving the alternative proposed friendly amendment for a vote?
Steve, it's just a point that Sue raised earlier, which was a point of order. You had an amendment, you had a proposal, you've now got an amendment which has been modified. Therefore, I would suggest that you have to vote on the membership accepting the amendment to the original proposal. And if that is moved and seconded and voted positively, then it takes over from the original proposal. And you need to go through that format so we don't have apologies subsequent to this meeting.
Thank you, Mike. Tim? Well, you put your hand down. Yusuke, you had a question?
No. It's okay.
Okay.
I just say against. Yeah.
So the request was that we vote, as Mike suggested, vote on acceptance of the amendment before we vote for the entire, call the question on the entire proposal.
Great.
So let's, all those who are not in favor of the amendment, unless, Eric, we want a specific vote, we can take this by a show of hands against the amendment. Is that satisfactory to you, Mike? A show of hands against the proposed amendment?
Yes,
such that we can determine. Okay. So if I could ask for a show of hands of those against the proposed friendly amendment. We have 2. Eric, I see 4.
Yep, I see 4 against.
So we just need a simple majority. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We need to know whether anybody's abstaining, Steve.
Thank you, Sue. Any abstentions? I don't see any. Don't see any in the chat or hands up. Last call. So Eric, it would seem that there's an overwhelming majority of members in favor of the friendly amendment.
Which added starting in 2022, yes.
Okay. So then we need to put the friendly amendment with the additional clarification of starting in 2022 to a vote to the membership.
Yep. And it's still the same people making the motion and seconding.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yep.
Everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
Any questions before we send this out for a vote? Okay. Hearing none, Eric?
Yeah, let me, I think I've been catching people as they come on. But let me just go through it really quick to make sure that nobody else is snuck in. So right now, the only 2 delegates that I don't show are in attendance are Slovakia and Turkey. Are either of you present yet? Everyone else that was absent initially at the roll call have since joined. Okay, let me just add the last, which is Calvert. Let me just catch up.
While you're counting, just a reminder for all those who are on this Zoom to please, if you can, adjust your name so that it includes your affiliation as well. That would be helpful.
Okay. I think we're good with the list now.
As noted, when this vote goes out, it will require a 2/3 majority to pass.
All right, this one will go out at 46 after the hour. To all delegates. Again, you'll get the email. If you haven't received it, please check your spam filter. If you still haven't got it, let me know and I can troubleshoot. And we can ultimately add a new email address if necessary. But we've had pretty good success with these getting through spam filters and getting to the right place. Okay, all the emails have been queued. And just as a reminder, well, actually, in this one, we can at least start the conversation, but typically we will move on. And then once the ballot actually closes, we will go back and share the results with the screen share. But this next vote requires this one to pass before we can move on to the next one. Looks like the emails have been sent and several of you are now starting to open the ballots.
Eric, in chat, Uganda have said they haven't received it.
You should have just got it, Makanda. Just went out at 4:46 a.m. my time. So it looks like your message came in at the exact same time. So let me know if you don't get it. I'm searching Uganda.
Eric, this is Kat from Peru. I have a question.
Okay.
In the ballot, was it supposed to say the year that it's supposed to start?
It was.
Yeah, the ballot says in 2022. Although it doesn't look like
It does not say that on mine, Eric.
No, you're right.
It does not say that.
You are correct. I don't know why that didn't save. Let me go back.
So hold.
Yeah, I think I can stop this one and start over.
All right. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thanks for
No,
checking.
we asked you to raise points of order.
Good catch.
Hey, Eric, can I ask another point of clarification?
Sure.
Are we not considering any of the other friendly amendments that were proposed? This was brought up by a couple of members to me.
And specifically, Mason, which friendly amendments?
I think the one where it was like the 1 year in person, the one that Carrie brought up that I yielded my time to.
Yes, well, we did consider that, and then we asked for a vote on this proposed language-friendly amendment. There seemed to be some debate about the relative cost of a virtual and concerns expressed about the potential relevant cost of a hybrid. And I didn't hear further support for that hybrid option as presented. So we put the friendly amendment forward with the addition of beginning in 2022 based on what I heard was the consensus of the group, and it was voted on unanimous or with 4, I think, voting against it and no abstention. So I didn't hear any objections. I didn't see any objections to the vote that we conducted.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just trying to clarify for a few people that are asking. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for the question.
Yep.
Yeah, Patrick said he hasn't received the email yet. Eric, that's in the chat, but Eric's still teeing it up with the corrected language for the motion. So Patrick, stand by, and Eric will double check your email that you put on the chat versus what he has.
And Patrick, South Africa, believe just an associate member at this point in time. TJ, if you could confirm that, which would mean you wouldn't get the vote, as only full member delegates are receiving ballots.
Is that correct, TJ?
That's confirmed. At this time, South African Lacrosse Association is an associate member.
All right, Patrick. Thank you, TJ, for that clarification. So Patrick, as an associate, you would not have a vote on this motion.
Okay.
And I'm going to take a look at this ballot, make sure to actually save this time. So the motion says to accept the World Lacrosse General Assembly should be held virtually in the future, with the exception of every third year, which will be held in person at a World Lacrosse Championship starting in 2022. So that has saved this time. We're going to start this one at 4:53. All right, it should start at 53 after the hour. Kat, I appreciate you catching that. That did not save appropriately. Emails have been queued.
They out, Eric?
Go back to that one, working on the next one. Yes, it does say it's running. Emails have been sent. Several of you have opened them.
So do we want to pause here to allow people the opportunity to vote? Do we want to move on with the agenda?
I think we'll pause here because it's going to require this one to pass before we move on to the next one.
Right. Good point.
Makanda, I don't know if you've received it yet. If you could just confirm for me in the chat what the email is that it should be going to if you did not get it. And I'll send you what I have based on the registration that came in.
So everyone should have received an email. Let us know if you have not, and you're a full member.
Several have voted. We've got 32 votes in so far. It kind of looks like you did end up receiving the last one, so I'm assuming you got this one as well. We are at currently 35 votes in, which is 91% of the vote, overwhelming majority. So it is going to pass. I can't share the results yet because it's not closed, but I think, Sue, we could move on to the next one.
Thank you very much, Eric. Steve, you're still in the chair, but the second part of the ballot, if we could have the next 7B up, please, Evan. Okay, so we originally proposed to determine whether the virtual GA should be held in October, November, or January, February. We have got an alternative amendment, which has been proposed by Latvia. From the World Lacrosse perspective, the reason we wanted to put it forward for virtual GA away from the world events is it relieves considerable pressure on us trying to organise both within the same time period. And ideally, having experienced it for last year and this year, I know we didn't have world events as well, but having experienced it, doing it during October, November, January, February makes much more sense to us in terms of the year, the ability to report on the year, and to remove it entirely from associated events. That's the reason for our original proposal. But Steve, I think if we could put the proposal, the motion on the table and the amendment on the table, and then open it for discussion.
Paul, did you have a question before we do that?
No, I'd like to comment if I can.
Sure.
Okay. The reason, to me, it's more important that the July 31st. If we move, so we approve the financial information, we approve the audit, and we approve the budgets going forward on a timely basis. If we move the GAs to October, November, then you're looking at 10 or 11-year-old, 10 or 11-month-old financial information that you're approving. And if it's January, February, it's probably 13 or 14 months because you won't have the audit done by that. If you wish to move the GAs to October, November, or January, February, then you should also change the fiscal year. So you can present the financial information within the 3 or 4 months, which is standard practice to be approved by the General Assembly. And that's why, to me, it's the international event is not that important, but it's not later than July 31st. That is what I consider to be important. That we approve the previous year's financials in a timely manner, and we approve the budget going forward in a timely manner. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification, I don't believe the GA is approving the financials. They are reviewing the financials. They do approve the budget, but the financials themselves are simply just reviewed.
Don't we have to approve the audited financial report? Or
no, you receive them. You approve the auditors, but you receive the audited report.
Okay.
And review it.
But still, yeah, I think, yeah, okay.
Right.
But I think you understand my point.
Your point as well is taken. Thank you, Paul, in terms of timing.
Could I make one response, which is that if we're having it aligned to an international event, we have often had international events in August and September. And with the Sixes coming up, our world event might in the future be in a different period altogether. Not later than July the 31st could mean that we have to have it virtually rather than associated with a world event, even if it's in the third.
Pauls, I would also suggest that just because we're not having we may not have a GA until later in the year, if you will, it doesn't mean we can't share the audited financials with the membership in advance of that GA. We might not be able to discuss them or answer questions about them within the GA framework, but they can be shared when completed with the membership. They could be. And certainly any questions that members would have about those audited financials could be posed whenever those questions arise. So I don't take this as suggesting that we would not share the audited financials. And Eric, please correct me, or Jim, If we decided to support the alternative submitted motion, that would, again, not necessarily mean we would not share the audited financials with the membership when the audit is complete.
Yeah,
Eric?
I'd agree. I'd agree with that. And then we're also sharing, the Finance and Audit Committee has agreed to share financials quarterly as well. So I think there will be complete transparency regardless of when the GA is held.
Sally, you had a question.
No, I was just going to make the same comment as Eric. Sorry.
Okay. Does that ease your concern at all, Pauls, or no?
I'd like to go forward.
Mike Slattery.
Steve, the motion as put currently, we're talking about the GA being held, but the way it's worded says that any international event has to be held not later than July 31. And therefore, it has a potential problem if you can't start to consider Northern Hemisphere with Southern Hemisphere, where you might try and avoid the Southern Hemisphere middle of winter for world events. So I wonder why it's not later than July 31. I understand Paul's point about financial reporting, etc., but this is really also about running international world championship events. And therefore, I would wonder why July 31 is important or relevant.
Yeah, that was Sue's point. I think that the calendar of events will likely move and shift based on the additional events the additional disciplines and the events associated with those disciplines that we've added to our program. So yeah, you echo Sue's clarification. Paul's.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I put this forward. I submitted it on the 6th of September, as was requested. That was the deadline to submit the wording, and the document on the timing of the GA was distributed on the 9th of September. That's why there might be a little bit of confusion here on that. So, but it's I put it forward. If people don't accept it, that's fine too. It's whatever. I don't think that it's such a problem. If it does become part of the Constitution, then I don't think it'll be such a problem taking it into account when you're looking at the schedule and you're organizing events and planning events.
So just to clarify, you're sticking with your not later than July 31.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mike.
Just on that, I accept clearly that meetings should preferably be aligned to an international event, but I do not understand or support, but not later than July 31. If World Lacrosse decides to run an international event for a world championship later than July 31, then that means people would have to, or countries would potentially have to attend a GA prior to July 31 and also attend subsequent to July 31. And that would be expensive in man time and dollar cost. And I therefore would ask perhaps Latvia to consider removing that last clause, but not later than July 31.
Pauls, could you hold for a second, please? We've got a question in the chat. Mark Coops of England asked, what is the current wording we were trying to change? Is it 5.3.1 in the Constitution? The answer is
kind of. I mean, we just changed the language with the last vote that it's going to be around an international event. So now we're trying to add the timing to that aspect. So to Mike Slattery's point, we've already said that it's going to be at an international event. Now we're trying to dictate the timing. Where we are agreeing to maybe not agree is whether the timing should be October, November, January, February, or with Paul's amendment that it's July 31st.
Yes. So I think we want to try to move this forward. If there are no other questions or comments, Pauls, we understand your rationale and appreciate your submission. Are there any other questions about the options here? I believe the process, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to first vote on the alternative submitted motion. Is that correct?
Before we go ahead, we can't vote until we know whether 7A has passed. So Eric, 7A has definitely passed.
Let me see. Yes, it's passed. 95% voters are in. I can share this screen. I'm going to kick Evan you out. Here's the running total.
Okay,
Thanks,
so
Eric.
it's clearly a 2/3 majority then. Okay,
Yes.
that's fine. Okay. Sorry, Steve.
No, I appreciate that. Nicholas asks, so 7B 531 relates to future virtual GAs. Yes, it would refer to all future GAs.
Virtual and in person, correct?
Correct. All right, any further questions? We can now move on. There's been an alternative motion proposed, and I believe we need to vote on the alternative motion before we go back to the originally submitted motion.
Yep, we need a second. We need a second of the Latvia recorded, please.
I'm happy to second him.
Thank you.
It was seconded also when it was submitted.
Yeah, it was seconded by Czech Republic and the Iroquois.
Okay, not on the screen, but thank you.
Okay.
This one, I'm guessing it'll be a more close vote. Do we want to do a roll call vote on this one rather than
No,
try and count hands?
I think we should do it as a ballot, this amendment.
Election buddy ballot?
Yep.
Okay. I'll start working on that.
All right, so members will receive via email a ballot requesting you to vote up or down on the alternative submitted motion rather. Eric's teeing that up.
I have a question, Finland, if I'm allowed to ask something.
Sure, go ahead, Carolyn.
The original submitted motion only refers to the virtual GA, but the alternative refers to all GAs, also the ones in person. So we're not voting on the same kind of GA.
I see your point. So we may need to offer a friendly amendment to consider a correction of that language so it would apply to all GAs.
Thank you.
It's a great catch. So we'll hold on that while we tee up the vote on the alternative submitted motion. But thank you.
Steve, I don't believe you can do a friendly amendment to the original submitted motion because we've already agreed that every third year we're going to have an in-person GA, which is obviously linked to an international event. So that event won't be in either October, November, or January or February, will it? It could be at any point during the year, which is what Sue had said, because it might be. So I don't think we can have a friendly amendment to the original submitted one.
All right, I appreciate that point. Let's hold on that for a second.
Well, so that goes back, I guess, to the original motion does only speak to the virtual ones. So we just approved that every third year would be held in person. So I think we're okay with this as is, to say that the in-person ones are going to be at around an event, whatever that event may be. It could be July, it could be August, it could be June. The virtual ones are going to be held on a different timeline, either October, November, or January, February. So I think we're okay.
Eric, Mason's asked how many voting countries do we have at this GA?
Right now in total delegates, it is it's already in. I think the last vote was 39, but let me just confirm. So we have 43 if everyone was in attendance. However, we still do not have Slovakia and Turkey. So we're at 41 registered voters. That includes all the full members plus a single board vote. Okay.
So that would mean a thirds would be 28. Is that correct?
Pardon me?
That would mean a 2/3 majority would require 28 votes.
So you're voting on the motion, that only requires a simple majority.
Simple majority.
Yeah, no, I'm
For the
sorry.
amendment.
I was speaking with respect to the 2/3 majority required in the cases in which a 2/3 majority is required. I believe of 41, that would be 28. Sally, is that your math as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Steve, I think if the voting pool is 43, you need 29 to pass on 2/3 majority.
Yeah, I thought we only had 41 who were on the
Oh,
call
there's
now.
two absent. Yes, my bad. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Better to be safe than sorry.
Yeah. If they show up, it's 20.
Yeah.
The language in this motion that will go out soon is to accept the amendment for, let's see, for 7B5. To accept the amendment for 7B531 that states the GL shall meet annually as determined by the membership, and meetings should preferably be aligned to an international event, but not later than July 31st. That requires simple majority, and that's a lot via proposal. And the responses are yes, I accept the amended motion, or no, I reject the amended motion. Okay. I'm going to change this. Okay, we're going to start this one at 5:18. And this started at 18 after the hour. Again, this will require a simple majority. Just a reminder, if you could please mute yourselves. Getting quite a bit of feedback. Emails have been queued. Emails are being sent. Several of you are starting to open the emails. As much as I like to say we could move on at this point in time, we're going to need to resolve this one before we decide to vote on whatever the motion is. So. %80 of you have voted.
And with 41 full members, obviously 21 votes required for a simple majority, correct?
Correct. 41 emails were sent. But it's 50% of those that actually vote, I think is the way our constitution reads.
Excuse me, Eric, it's on your screen as saying 2/3 majority. So isn't that greater than 27.3?
My screen.
Yeah, if this amendment is passed, which requires a simple majority, then we will revote on the motion, which would require a 2/3 majority to pass.
Correct.
Steve, you've got against the alternative submitted motion, a 2/3 majority required Latvia proposal.
You're speaking of the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ballot that went out is seeking approval to accept the amendment, which is a simple majority. If the amendment is accepted, then we will vote on the alternative submitted motion that requires a 2/3 majority.
Okay. Now you've clarified it. I understand. Thank you.
Yeah. %93 of you have voted. This ends in a minute. Okay, it's now completed. I will share my screen. Okay, you'll see that this does pass. 18 votes because there were 6 abstentions ultimately carried it. A total of 38 ballots submitted. Vote by vote.
Okay, so the amendment passed, and we will now vote on the amendment.
Correct. Let me get that.
Which becomes a substantive motion now. And so
So if we'll tee this up as quickly as we can for a vote. It requires a 2/3 majority to pass.
Steve, has discussion been ended on the motion?
No, we
Further
need to.
discussion on the motion.
Yep.
Go ahead, Sue, sorry.
No, I was just going to say now it is a substantive motion. We can open the floor up for any further comment on it. Or we should.
I would only make the comment from a cost perspective that if our world events are later than July 31st, falling on a year when it is an in-person / hybrid meeting, it would be prohibitively expensive to have a standalone General Assembly, both for countries attending and for World Lacrosse to stage such an event.
Yes.
Everybody understand that point? We'll start with questions. Walter, you had a question or a hand raised?
Okay, well, right now we are voting in something that requires a 2/3 majority, but what if it's denegate? What is the previous status to see what we are voting? Okay, having the General Assembly in before July, or what? What will be the second one?
Yeah, so I think your question is, what is the status quo? Because if we vote on this motion, it does not pass, where are we with respect to the status quo?
Exactly.
Steve, I believe we would be voting on the original motion.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. The motion to amend it was accepted. We vote on the amended motion. If that does not pass, we go back to the original motion, which would be for the membership to choose a new timeline.
And Walter, maybe your question coming up will be, what if neither pass? What is the status quo? So we'll answer that question as well.
Exactly. Thanks a lot.
Kat?
Thanks, Steve. I just want to point out that, we passed the first proposal, and for everyone to just read that or reread that to make sure that if we pass this second one, the language might just be really confusing and cause further confusion down the road based on what we passed on the first one. Just want to point that out.
So right now, the Constitution 531 speaks to a time frame between June and August. So I think we'd have to go back to that. We would have to amend our Constitution with the language that just was approved that said we were going to have every third year be in person and the other two virtually. And then I think we would stick with our current time frame, which is June to August, which is preferably aligned to an international event in June and August.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Kat. Pauls?
Yeah, I would suggest that if this does not pass with a 2/3 majority, then the original clause, article, as it is currently written in the Constitution stands. Because there was already, this is superseded the original proposal, which was defeated. And so if this it does not get a 2/3 majority vote, then the original proposal, then neither one has been accepted, and the amendment, the article in the Constitution as it is written currently stands.
I don't believe we have voted on the originally submitted motion, have we?
We haven't.
Yes, we did. We did. It was already in effect. You have.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do some Robert's rules conferring. Nicola, sorry.
That's okay. Sorry, there we are. I'm here. I'm getting very confused now because we seem to be going around and around. So we have voted, as far as I understand, we have agreed that we will have a general assembly in person every third year and a virtual assembly in the intervening years. Is that correct?
Yep.
Right, so we've agreed that. Now we're just debating whether we have the virtual ones in October and November and January and February, but we've just accepted the motion is passed that Paul's put up, which says that the GA must meet annually. We've accepted to put that in as the amendment. So does that mean we voted on that? So we now put that up to vote. We're now going to vote on whether the GA shall meet annually or as determined by the membership, and the meeting should preferably be aligned to an international event. So essentially, we're voting to say that the virtual ones will be held prior to the end of July. Is that right?
Correct.
Correct. Because
no, that's not
we...
correct. The motion from Latvia is the GA. It doesn't specify virtual or physical.
Yeah,
No,
but
no,
we've already passed that. We've said that all GAs are now going to be either that we've agreed. We've already passed the amendment. We've already passed the whatever it's called, the thingamajiggy, to say to have general assemblies every third year in person and every other year virtually. We've just passed that.
We have.
Yes. So we're not. This amendment will. Basically, the GA will meet, whether it be virtually or in person, and we've already said it will be virtually, and now we'll meet virtually before the end of July 31st, or we'll meet in person, assuming there is an international event. But the problem with Paul's thing now is that we might have an international event in August. So that would then be a problem, because as someone's pointed out, that would cause extra expense for everyone to get to the in-person one. So you would have to friendly amend this thing that Paul's has put up to say that it would have to be the end of August or when the international event is. Otherwise, we would be in a situation where we could be going to an event that isn't an event, if you see what I mean. We're going to a GA that isn't aligned to an event.
That is correct. That's the issue that Jim brought forward. And as we've discussed, given the number of disciplines we currently conduct championships for, or will be conducting championships for, it is likely, certainly, that we could have a world championship later than July 31, later than the end of August. So that is a complication to the alternative submitted motion. You're absolutely right. Pauls.
Yes. What?
Your hand is up.
Oh, that was, I made my point already. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. Uganda.
I forgot to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steve. I'm just trying to submit something. I've been trying to think through. I know I've already agreed on the virtual involvement for the 3 years, but there's also an option. I guess already maybe to be discussed in the next general assembly, where we think it's also a good idea to maintain the same involvement, because most of the members actually attend normally attend the championship, and we are thinking that we could maintain the same involvement, but also give a chance to people who can't make it, having this virtual kind of setting where they can attend the assembly. At the same time, the people at the involvement or championship can have physical meetings, while others are virtual, have the virtual kind of setting. Thank you.
I didn't get that completely, Eric. Did you follow that, or should we ask Makanda to put it in the chat?
Yeah, I was struggling to hear. There's quite a bit of feedback in the line. Makanda, suspect you're on a cell phone. It sounded like you were in a car.
So kind of apologies, we couldn't really hear you well.
Hello?
Yes, we're here, but we're having a hard time hearing you, Makanda.
Hello, am I clear here?
No.
No.
Hello?
Yeah, there's a lot of feedback in the background, so we're having a hard time hearing what you're saying. We can hear you talking, but it's difficult to hear what you're saying given the feedback.
Hello?
Ibra, can you write in the chat your comment?
All right, while he regains connectivity,
Hello?
Sue, you had your hand up.
I do. I've looked up the Roberts Rules issue, and it says if the amendment is passed, it becomes a motion, which is what we're just about to do. If the amended motion does not pass, then the original motion has not been changed in any way. So therefore, I contend we do, as Steve said, go back to the original motion if this doesn't pass with a 2/3 majority.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sue, very much. So, Eric, you're teeing up the alternative motion for a 2/3 vote, correct?
Yes.
Any other questions or comments before Eric sends this motion out via email? We've clarified that if this motion does not pass by the required 2/3 majority, that we will then go back to the originally submitted motion, perhaps have some conversation or clarification of that if required, and then send that out for a 2/3 majority vote to pass. Okay.
And Thomas from Slovakia, I think I saw you on. Are you now on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, Thomas, you're a registered delegate, so I'll now add you to the voting.
So while we're teeing up the vote, hopefully everybody is seeing in the chat, there's some conversation. New Zealand says, should this state virtual GA is only given we've already agreed in-person GA is at the timing of the international event. Wales, the retort there, I don't think it matters as we passed that GAs are virtual every 3rd year. Jim offered a clarification. It does, it would further restrict when the GA could be held on those years it is in person. So again, that's back to the complication of the in-person GAs, how they would fall. And if by chance, which is a possibility, a world championship was held, that could significantly add to the complexity and cost of having our GA earlier in the year if the in-person GA is not aligned with the World Championship, because the World Championship is held later in the year. So just reiterating that complication that's already been stated if this motion passes.
Okay, ballots are out. Silver, you're starting to vote. This does require 2/3 majority to pass. I hesitate to say that we can move on like we plan to do, because we may have to go back and tackle this one again. So
Yes, we can't. No. %83 of you have voted. In the interest of time, Sue, I'll pose this question to you. This will not pass. Okay, so then we need to set up the vote ballot to go back to the original motion then.
Yeah, and I'll just give some stats now. 83% of you voted. I can actually probably refresh. It might even be more now. 93% have now voted. There's only 14 votes for the positive to accept and 20 against. So even if the last three voters, 39 of 42 have voted. So if the last three voters voted for the motion, it would still only have 17 votes for and 20 votes against. So it's not able to pass.
Okay, Eric, could you then be, I know because you've got both, but could you be ready to get the next ballot out on the original motion then?
Yep.
Please. Yeah, thanks.
So as I work through this one, this will now be giving a choice, whether it's the October, November, or January, February. So you won't be voting yes or no. You'll be selecting one of the two options. It will require 2/3 majority. So if one of the two options does not achieve the required 2/3 majority, we would drop the one with the lowest vote, and then we would rerun the motion with the preferred timing and try and achieve 2/3 majority at that point in time. Hopefully that made sense. Let's wait for this one to officially end. Yeah, the original motion will be going out at 5:48 after the hour. Mike, did you have a question? I see your hand up.
Yes, please, Eric. In here, you've got to be held in either October, November, or Jan, Feb. Presumably that's or subsequently Jan, Feb being the next year rather than Jan, Feb prior to the calendar year where the World Championships are held. So can you at least verbally clarify that, if not amend it subsequently?
The answer is yes. It's if you like, in the winter period of the Northern Hemisphere. So there could be, if we went to January, February, a longer period than 1 year that we would normally have. So we might not have in one calendar year to get onto that cycle. We might not have an event in that calendar year, a GA in that calendar year.
Yeah, so it's really or subsequently Jan, Feb.
Yeah. Or yes, or the following January, February. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Ballots are out. Again, you're choosing your preferred time. Back to the original motion.
Eric, just for a clarification, we are voting now for October, November, or January, February. If the first one, which kind of like win this vote, is declined by the GA, then we vote on the other 2 months or not?
No, you choose your preferred option. So when you get your ballot, it'll say I pick either October, November, or January, February. If we get 2/3 majority on one of those two times, we're done. If we don't, we'll drop the one that wasn't the preferred time, and we'll rerun the motion to say to determine whether the virtual GA should be held in either October, November, or just say in October, November, or January, February, depending which the preferred one was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Mike, you've got your hand up again. Is that still from the old hand?
Yeah, that was still from the old hand.
Sue, I see your.
Yes, my suggestion is that while this voting is being carried out, we moved on to 7C, because I think we're going to withdraw any of those anyway today.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
So could we have the next ballot up, please? 7C. Okay, I'll speed through this one because you've got lots of lines through it. We originally submitted various motions, all of which we are withdrawing in the light of the 7A vote that we've already had and what we're currently voting on. In the rationale below, you will see a question that Nicola asked, which is what were the dates for 2022 GA? They are booked for June the 27th, June the 28th. That's a Monday, Tuesday before the World event. And that is because a number of the teams will be going straight on from the women's event in Towson down to Alabama to the World Games. So we can't hold it afterwards. So it has to be in advance of the event on this occasion. So the rest of all of that is deleted. We could move, unless, sorry, I could say, are there any questions before we move on to the next slide? I'll take my hand down. Okay, we'll move on to 7D then.
Sorry, can I, so are you saying that the GA won't now be?
No, the GA, I said the rest of it's deleted. The
Okay.
GA definitely June the 27th, 28th in Towson. Now that we have voted to have an in-person GA next year.
Lovely, thank you ever so much.
Okay. Okay, this was moved from day one to day two. And it's what will, if what you're voting on now passes, we will withdraw this one as well in total, but we'll see what the outcome is. So we're just looking at what happens now.
This should be ending soon. Unfortunately, I can't forecast. Okay, this is now complete. I'll share my screen. Okay, the preferred time is October, November. It did not pass with the required 2/3. There were a number of abstentions. So we'll now run, I'll go through the vote by vote. Okay, I'm going to stop share for a second. We'll now run it again. The new motion will say To approve the virtual GA should be held in the October through November time period. This will require 2/3 majority. Okay, we're gonna start this one at 58 after the hour. Okay, this one should start in a minute. Emails are queued. All emails have been sent. %, 6% are in. We could move on and come back to this one if you choose, Sue.
We can't because we need to know whether we're withdrawing it or not, based on the result of this vote.
It will pass.
Well,
90%,
please.
90% are in. And 89.5% of those are to the positive.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, on the assumption that that is carried out, we then withdraw 7D because we've already altered that, and we'll make the amendments appropriately in the handbook once it's agreed. Thank you very much, Steve, for chairing that part of the meeting and discussion for us. I'm proposing at this point, because we had no intent that this was going to go on this long for this item when we changed the agenda around. I'm proposing that we should now have a 10-minute break, as we've been going for 2 hours, and come back to Governance Working Group report immediately after the break. So we'll give you the results of the vote at that point as well. So could we please take a break at this moment for 10 minutes, coming back. Yeah, in 10 minutes time, 12:10 for me.
Okay, 10 minutes after the hour, wherever you are, we'll pick back up. Thank you all for your patience in working through that.
Okay, it's now 10 past the hour. And Michael, I see you're here back and ready. So I propose we continue. Thank you.
Sue, do you want me to share the results?
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you very much. Before that, thank you, Eric.
Okay, I think there's two that we haven't shared. I gave you the results verbally. So the first one, this was the one to accept the motion, the initial amendment, then the 2/3 after that was accepted, then the 2/3 to approve the lot fee proposal. That did not pass. It needed 2/3 and only got 14 to the positive and 20 to the negative. Vote by vote audit. Okay. And then the second one passed 34-4 for a total 89.5% of the votes cast. Vote by vote on that one. Okay. Back to you, Sue. Michael.
Thank you very much. Michael, over to you.
Evan, if we could have you pull up the slide again, please.
Thank you very much, Sue. I'm just waiting as that gets pulled up. So really, at this juncture, I'm effectively reporting on the conclusion of the work of the governance working group and what will be a transition to a more business as usual stage where there will be a governance committee which will be established to take on the work that the governance working group had commenced and had, I believe, made considerable progress around. So what I was reminded of in preparing for this is a great concept from my playing days, which is time and room. I always love to have time and room to take a good shot, and really I think that is a good way or a good metaphor for describing what we've done since the 2019 in-person GA, which took place in Peterborough, where a lot of issues were raised. World Lacrosse itself had a very ambitious and continues to have an ambitious strategic plan, but there was a lot of this governance infrastructure that was sort of creaking behind trying to keep up, and there was a lot of confusion caused, etc. So it was I think a good decision at that time to take some time and room. So what you can do is you see your target very clearly, you see what the obstacles are very clearly, be they players or a goalkeeper, etc. And you can pick your shot and identify how you can achieve your goals effectively. So I feel like we've taken that time and room to evaluate where the key areas are. There were a number of subgroups which were established by the governance working group, and as you all know from the first part of the GA meeting, many of those recommendations came separately. One of the additional components of this was to really do an audit of World Lacrosse, sort of the governance architecture. So the constitution, the bylaws, look at various policies that existed and various procedures. And it became very clear to me that, you know, over an extended period of time, all these separate documents were developed. Certainly, there were issues around the need to combine previously separate relevant policy and documentation when there were two separate international federations, one for women and one for men. And really, it had accumulated to the extent that it became very difficult, especially from a user perspective, that is NGBs, to really navigate all of this and to understand it in its totality. So this particular proposal that's being made here was a big exercise to undertake that audit, to consolidate relevant governance related documentation in a way that makes sense structurally. So that includes separation into 4 different parts: constitution, bylaws, policies, codes of conduct, protocols and procedures, and really to reorganize certain components so that you have similar provisions together and in the right place. So and much of this involved a considerable editing exercise to sort of pull all that together. And so what we did, again, taking the time and room concept and the work of the governance working group, we made sure we were consistently from a very early stage communicating what it is we were trying to do in relation to the handbook. I think draft versions of the handbook have been available since January of this year. We had what I think is quite unprecedented levels of consultation around this. That involved World Lacrosse stakeholder engagement webinars that were dedicated specifically to this, roadshow webinars with each of the continental federations, one-to-one meetings with specific NGBs, processing, receipt and processing of individual submissions around the content of the handbook, which often included toing and froing. And throughout that whole process, all of the issues that were raised were captured in the tracker, which is a big Excel file, which the governance working group has made available to all members quite publicly since it began its work in the autumn of 2019. So we believe we've equally, made a good assist to give time and room to our teammates, which is all of you, to evaluate and look at all this documentation so that you can consider it within reasonable timeframes, think about it, make a contribution, have that contribution process. The documents aren't perfect. They are intended to bring us to, I think, several steps forward to having a solid set of a solid handbook. So they will continue to be worked on, but at least by establishing the handbook, it creates a much better framework within which edits, suggestions, proposals can be made. And as I say, it's much more user-friendly. It's also makes all of these provisions much more accessible to new members. As we know, we're all in a drive to grow the game globally. And I think it's a major advantage to be able to hand a new NGB a whole handbook off the shelf so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel in relation to a number of items. So that's really just by way of introduction on that. As you see in front of you, the motion is to approve the World Lacrosse Handbook. So I believe I then hand over to Sue for anything further in this regard.
Thank you, Michael. It's been seconded by Steph Michelson as well. So we'll open the floor for discussion and questions. I think I'd just make one comment to add to something Michael said, which is that it wasn't only difficult for NGBs to find the relevant documentation, it was also difficult for World Lacrosse at times to find its own documentation. So we really are hugely thankful to the work that Michael's done to try to bring all of this together in a logical format. And if this is passed, the intent is then that in the next few months, we will transition this onto the World Lacrosse website and remove existing separate documents. So you would only then go to the World Lacrosse Handbook on the website in the future. So at the moment, you've got both, as you discovered from voting on day one with the existing constitution and bylaws. So, but we will transition over the next couple of months so that we have only one set of documents in place, which will have been edited following this GA. Okay, I now open it up to any questions, comments, anybody would like to raise. Not seeing any. Eric, are you seeing anyone?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, and it doesn't appear as though any hands are raised.
Okay, could we then move? Oh, sorry, Mike Slattery got his hand up.
To just one point, membership of the working group or whatever the ongoing group is called is really representative from the nominees that go there rather than a nominated individual that World Lacrosse accepts. And therefore, I would seek clarification that in the way it goes forward with the governance of this group in the future, that the individuals are not an individual name, but a representative of the entity that nominated them and was accepted in the first place.
Could we come on to that next after the, because it's a separate paper after the handbook?
Yeah, sure, sure.
Okay.
But it's an important point, I think.
Yep, sure.
Thank you.
Albert.
Hi, Sue. Can I just ask whether Steph can actually second the motion in here?
You. I was reflecting on that as I said it.
Yeah.
So thank you for your point of order.
Another second that will make it easy. Thank you.
Steph is not a full member at this point, ELF, and therefore we need another full member to second it. Please.
Well, Scotland will second.
Thank you very much, Mason.
No problem.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Okay, then could we go to the ballot then, please, on the motion to approve the World Lacrosse Handbook?
Yes, we'll start this at 24 after the hour.
When that vote goes out after a minute, I'll start conversation about the governance committee because we won't be having a 10-minute break.
Okay, that one's queued up, ready to go. 24. Emails have been sent. Like some of you were starting to open the emails.
Okay, while that vote's finalising and coming through, can we go on to discuss the governance committee and Mike's comments specifically? Sally, would you like to answer Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Sue. Mike, it would be my intention after today's GA to be writing to the continental federations to ask them to put forward their nominee. There is a list of the skills and knowledge and experience that we're looking for attached to the committee. So I would just be writing to the continental federations and the Athletes Commission to seek their nominations within the next 6 weeks or so. So we can start the committee from January next year. And then depending on the skills, knowledge and experiences we get, we would then be going out to seek other people who could perhaps fill the gap in the knowledge and the skills.
Yeah, thanks, Sally. It's really a single issue in terms of when an accepted nominee from a representative body cannot attend, could they be substituted with somebody with an equally capable ability to represent that party in regard to the governance working group or whatever it's going to be called in the future? Because in history, it hasn't been.
So the governance committee, you mean?
Well, the governance committee, yes, if that's the right word, yeah.
Can I, rather than have an immediate answer now, Mike, I'd like to kind of reflect on that and think about whether you can have an official and a second representative, if that's what you're thinking about.
Well, it's
an alternate,
really is it an individual that the World Lacrosse accepts or a nominee with appropriate qualifications that the appropriate party within World Lacrosse asks to represent them?
No, it's the latter.
Historically, it hasn't been very clear, and frankly, it appears to have been very much a closed working group.
No, okay, well, I can't comment on the current governance working group, but going forward, I would be writing to the continental federations, and it's their nominee that would be attending the meetings.
Okay, let's work that out, because ideally, from both our points of view, there should be somebody at each meeting, conversation or workshop, whatever it is, that has full input and consideration from all points of view.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly the meetings would be held in an agreed date that everybody could attend. So I kind of, I mean, it's definitely going to be that whoever the name put forward by the Continental Federation, that would be the person coming to the meetings. And then we would be establishing meetings, workshops or whatever around the dates and availability of the people at the nominated people.
Yes, but if those nominated people, for whatever reason, cannot attend, it is strongly believed that there should be the ability to substitute somebody with the appropriate qualifications in their stead.
And that's the kind of thing I'd like to think through, Mike, because in my experience, I can see Steph wants to make a comment, but in my experience, we would be trying to hold the meeting when the designated nominated person could attend. But let me think that one through and see what Steph has to say.
That would be ideal, but unfortunately, life isn't always ideal.
Okay.
But please reflect, and happy to have a conversation about it subsequently.
Thank you. Steph.
Maybe a bit of clarification from Mike's point of view. Is it just like if somebody can't make a one-off, make the meeting for one meeting, are you just looking to have somebody deputize in that case? So like if, as an example, if I wasn't able to make it, I could deputize somebody from ELF to go on my behalf to that one meeting, report back, et cetera, or are we talking about like permanently replace the original nominee?
No, Steph, it's really about if somebody for some reason cannot attend one individual meeting for whatever circumstance arrives, can in our case, the Continental Federation, provide a deputy with the appropriate experience to represent that entity in the meeting, not permanently, just one off, because historically it's been precluded. It's very much a by name to World Lacrosse or no one.
Yeah, I think in that case, I would support Mike, because I think it's important that as CFs, we are always kept up to date. And I mean, obviously, Michael's done a great job in making sure that the communications are sent out. But I think, yeah, being able to deputize somebody into the meeting would be quite helpful. So I think I would be in favor of that from ELF's point of view as well.
Okay.
I would just add that, if I may, I think a balance between making sure that there's a consistency of representation on that group so that there's not perspective lost if there's a constant transition. So whatever the appropriate balance is there, I think that's, Sally, you'll take that in consideration, I know.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions on the committee? Okay, Sally will be in touch with you all then, looking for nominees. Thank you very much, Sally, for that. And thanks. Can we, Eric, go back to the vote, please?
Yeah, before I do so, I just want to, there are a couple of things said in chat. Ian from Switzerland said, thank you to all in the governance working group for your work. And then Kat said, agree with Ian. Round of applause to all on the governance working group. Excellent work, which I would echo. I think we all feel that way and appreciate the leadership Sue and Michael have had with that group. I'm going to share my screen. This vote has now been completed. Okay, you can see this passed 39-0. 40 ballots submitted with 1 abstention. And the vote by vote.
Okay, thank you very much. And once again, thank you very much to Michael, who's done most of the heavy lifting on this for us and keeping us on track, literally with lots of tracking, and his whole approach to a structured way of going about it has been really helpful and really appreciated. So the biggest round of applause definitely to Michael on this. It's okay, let's move on then to finances. So I'm introducing Sally at this point, who's going to give you an overview of where we are.
Sorry, thank you. Okay, as I said at the beginning, we're going to address items 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4 under my introductory remarks. And then we'll open each of the items for discussion. So during 2021, a lot of work has been undertaken on our financial systems, including the introduction of a new chart of accounts that includes classes that help further organise our expenses. And we have transferred our previous financial information line by line across into this new chart of accounts. In order to be able to monitor and manage our income and expenditure better and track our activity, we have developed a more detailed chart of accounts, which is why you are seeing more financial information this year than previously. However, this does mean that it is difficult to do a comparison with the previous year as the financial information is presented differently, which is why, for example, you have only 1 year for the audited accounts without a comparison with 2019. Going forward, you will receive 2 years of accounts for comparison. In addition, we received feedback on the pre-GA webinars that you felt there was too much detail in the year-to-date actuals. And so we will work with you again to identify how much information you wish to receive in future, for example, along the line of the budget. And finally, we're going to be looking at the balance sheet or the statement of position, as it is named in the papers, up to the 31st of August. It is our aim to send you the information quarterly next year, along with a commentary highlighting the key differences, so that you are also aware of major changes to our income and expenditure. So that's kind of the brief background to those three documents, and I'm now going to pass back to Sue to seek any questions on the agenda items 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4. Thanks,
Okay,
Sue.
thank you very much, Sally. And Sally's end of Sally's first year with us in this role. So a lot to get her head round at the same time as we're changing things as well. So thank you very much, Sally. Okay, over to all of you. Any questions? Not seeing any hands up. At the moment, nothing in chat. Okay. So if there are no questions, we haven't got a vote on the first three. They're pieces of information for you to review. And I'm sure if you have any questions, Sally or Eric would be happy to take those outside the meeting. So we'll move on then to item 3.5, Sally, budget.
So the 2022-23 budget was circulated to you last month, following discussion and approval by the Finance and Audit Committee. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank members of that committee for their contributions to the work during 2021, and in particular, Caroline McCluskey from Australia Lacrosse and Yusuke Sasaki from Japan Lacrosse. Thank you very much, both of you. You've made valued contributions. The budget for 2022, as last year, is broken down into two areas: achieving the Olympic vision and supporting the activities of our membership. And in addition, as we've highlighted on the pre-GA webinars, we are now going to be focusing on the sustainability of World Lacrosse going forward and the identification of different sources of funding to support the work of the organisation. The budget for 2023 is an indicative one and may change depending on the decision taken on whether lacrosse is included in the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. So I would therefore like to propose that we approve the 2022-23 annual budget.
Yes, could we have that motion back up on the screen?
Yep, let me just share that. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's proposed by Sally, seconded by Bob DeMarco. So now I open the floor to any questions or comments.
Not seeing any in the chat or seeing any hands raised.
Okay, last chance. Okay, Eric, could you move to vote then to put the ballot out, please?
I think
No,
this is
not that
going to
one.
be a two.
This is a two-stage one, is it?
Yep, two-stage one.
Okay, okay, sorry, my bad. Okay, we go on to the audited accounts then. Sally.
Thank you. Okay, following the approval of the
approval of the auditors. Approval of the auditors rather than the audited accounts.
Yeah, following the approval of the membership at the first session of GA earlier this month to allow the board to appoint the auditors for up to 3 years, the board is now seeking your approval to the continuation of the use of War and Goodwin to be the World Lacrosse auditors for a further 2 years. They did a good job of the 2020 audit with an in-depth review of both financials and internal controls. And so, consistent with best practice, our recommendation is to continue with War and Goodwin for the next 2 years and take advantage of their initial work and the benefits of continuity. So I would like to propose to approve extending War and Goodwin LLP until such time the Board of Directors recommend a change. At a minimum, War and Goodwin will be re-evaluated following the completion of the 2022 audit, and a new recommendation will be submitted for approval at the 2023 General Assembly.
Thank you very much, Sally. Again, this is a motion proposed by Sally, seconded by Bob DeMarco. I now open the floor to any comments about the approval of the auditors or questions.
I'm not seeing any in the chat or seeing any hands raised.
Okay, then I propose that we go to ballot. Go to the ballot, please, Eric.
Okay, work on that. Okay, this will go out at 42 after the hour. Emails have been sent. Looks like many of you are starting to open the emails. Votes are coming in. Sue, we've got 70% of the votes in. Do we want to move on to Blue Skies Working Group? Come back to this one. Sue's on mute, maybe just stepped away for a moment.
I think she stepped away for a minute. So we can't start without her, Eric. So.
Rudderless, like a ship in the night.
What did you want to start on?
We can move into Blue Skies Working Group if you want. We've got 86% of the vote in.
We've got 86% of the vote in, and it's a 2/3 majority.
This is a 2/3 majority. No, these are simple majority.
Simple.
Okay.
And I can give you just a quick look at results. Yeah, these will pass. We're at 38-0 and 37-0, so we can move on and come back to this one later.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you particularly to Eric and Sally for a whole heap of work that's gone on over the course of this year, and the Finance and Audit Committee. But also thank you to all of you for the individual conversations and emails you've been having with us over the finances and trying to get it into a shape that you would like it for the future. Again, we really appreciate what you've been doing. Now, the schedule said we were going to have a break after finances, but we've only been going for half an hour or so. So I'm proposing that we go straight into the Blue Skies Working Group and pass over at this point to Steve. But before I do that, can I remind you that This is should be delegates only. If observers want to speak, they need to go through their delegate. We should really be following only having one person contributing each argument on each of these. Sorry, you only contributing once on each of the arguments on each of these in order to save time. You've had lots of webinar time and individual conversations and roadshows, so I hope a lot of the questions and queries have been answered already. And we are going to put a total cap on this period of 1 hour 35 minutes. So there will be times when I'll try to move the conversation on in this area. So Steve, over to you.
Thanks very much, Sue. And I want to first begin by thanking the members of the Blue Sky Working Group, who are a great team, actually, a very representative team and a very passionate team. I also want to thank the membership for, I won't say unprecedented, because I think this is the last couple of years we've collectively had unprecedented engagement in so many of the strategic conversations and discussions we've had across operations, but clearly great feedback, great engagement from the membership on this particular issue. As Sue mentioned, we've conducted a number of webinars on these recommendations, starting back in the late summer through the months leading up to this General Assembly. We sent out those final recommendations according to the schedule required. We've had great individual conversations. Members of the Blue Sky Working Group have had great individual conversations with members. Based on those conversations, we've sent out some clarifications a couple of weeks ago in terms of perspective of the Blue Sky Working Group. And we've more recently had some great conversations with Continental Federation leadership and members with respect to the federations themselves. And so I want to thank the CF leadership for enabling those conversations moving forward. These are strategic recommendations that will be clarified and evolved in the years to come, and we're hopeful that the membership will consider them as very much strategic recommendations with details to be evolved and finalized based on membership approval moving forward. As you've read, you've seen that we have 3 proposals before you with respect to the World Event Calendar, with respect to World Championship allocation and qualification, and with respect to World Championship format and structure. And we've got motions that have been supported and seconded on each of those. I'll make a couple of comments before I turn it over to Sue to facilitate those motions and discussion as necessary. On the World Event Calendar, we submitted that according to the deadline. And as I mentioned in a couple of webinars, we did receive some feedback prior to that deadline for submission and this session of the GA relative to calendar to suggest that we should consider beginning the qualification process in 2024 in anticipation of the 2026 Women's World Championship, rather than waiting for 2025 in anticipation of the 2027 Men's World Championship. So that is a possible amendment or a possible consideration that we can either take up here or depending on the success of the recommendation in terms of passing, we can consider that later. But I thought that was a great point. It had to do with gender equity, and it had to do with some enthusiasm for introducing that qualification proposal sooner rather than later. So that's a caveat there with respect to that recommendation. With respect to the allocation and qualification proposal, we had some great conversations recently with CF leaders, and it was clear that to some there was some confusion relative to the modeling that we provided as part of our full proposal. We were asked to provide some modeling so people could get their eyes and ears and heads around what it could look like, but that was not intended to project what it will look like. We don't know what it will look like because we don't have all of that data yet relative to who would qualify. So that was confusing, I think, to some as they look to the model as gospel, if you will, as to what would happen. That wasn't the case. And once we were able to clarify that, I think hopefully we got feedback that that kind of eased the concerns of some who took that model as for fact as to what would happen. That was not the case at all. With respect to the format and structure, that is no further kind of comments in that regard. And again, I just want to thank the membership for their indulgence, for their engagement, and for their input, which helped to shape these recommendations. Sue?
Okay, Steve, my notes say that you're going to introduce Kat to do the first motion. I don't know whether she's speaking or not, so.
Yeah, if we're going to bring that up, if we have that on a slide, I don't know that we do, Eric.
Yep, next slide. There we go.
Yep, there we go.
Okay, so we're going to take these all three issues in relation to BSWG in one ballot with three separate votes at the end. So Steve will introduce members of BSWG to propose the motions and, where appropriate, to speak further and help answer questions. Okay, Steve, back to you.
Thank you, Sue. So the first motion has to do with recommending the World Championship calendar, and Kat, would you please introduce that motion?
Absolutely, happy to do so. So Peru is happy to move to accept the BSWG strategic recommendations pertaining to the World Championship calendar.
Thank you very much. And that's seconded by Steve. So I now open the floor for comments and questions about this specific proposal.
I'm not seeing any in the chat or seeing any hands raised.
Okay, then we'll move on to the second one, which is the team allocation and qualification. Steve.
Yes, if we can flip the slide, that'd be great. So Glenn, would you please introduce this motion?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I'd be happy to. So essentially 10.4.2 is to accept the Blue Sky Working Group strategic recommendations pertaining to the World Championship team allocation and qualification.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all the big words in that one.
Thank you, Glenn. Seconded by Steve Stenison again. Now I open the floor to questions on this proposal.
Seeing any in the chat? Doesn't appear as though we've got any hands raised.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the third one, which is the World Championship format and structure.
That's correct. Greetings from sunny Germany. So this motion is actually to accept the Blue Sky Working Group's strategic recommendations pertaining to the World Championship format and structure.
Thank you very much. And again, seconded by Steve Stenison. I open the floor to questions and comments. Okay, not seeing anything in chat. Oh, there's one hand up. Steph recognized.
Sorry, yeah. Also dealing with a very fussy dog at the moment. So I just have, it's this issue with reducing the numbers, because World Lacrosse has tried this twice already, and is now proposing to have a 2-tier event, which would ultimately have more than 30 teams involved. And it's quite unclear if this would be two geographically and chronologically distinct events, or if this would be one event with 2 tiers organized at the same time. Would this level of support around the 2 events be identical? Or I know I'm just a bit skeptical that Div 1 would be great and Div 2 would be less great. And you know, World Lacrosse keeps going on about how there's no host for 30+ teams. And I wonder, is it the specifications that World Lacrosse is giving people? Because I know 2 European NGBs who've been in touch about hosting events, gotten the paperwork from World Lacrosse, and they just go, no thanks, this is not possible. So I wonder if World Lacrosse has conflated the issue of not being able to host 30 plus teams, or World Lacrosse having paperwork that discourages people from acting as hosts. This has been raised, in our Blue Skies working group seminar that we had within ELF, but I think it's worthwhile that other countries and CFs consider this question as well.
Yeah, appreciate that question, Steph. In our recommendations, it's clear under structure that World Lacrosse to provide equitable financial, operational, and marketing support to CF championships, qualifiers, and world championships. So that is part of the recommendation in our paper to answer your first question about support for all championships equitably. So if you supported this recommendation, you would be supporting equitable support for not only the qualifiers, but the two championships. I hope that answers the first question, because that's part of our recommendation. With respect to the second point, there's no question that I think part of this recommendation would result in clarifying and evolving and improving the hosting requirements for both qualifiers and world championships. And that doesn't mean necessarily making them more onerous. It means making them consistent and making them, at least to a certain extent, more accessible. To your point, we don't want to make it overly complicated, in my view, to host a world championship. By the same token, we want some minimum standards in place to host a world championship. And I think the balance there is to come. So there's no question that we need to evolve our hosting manual and those requirements, and that would be a next step to approving this recommendation.
Steve, there was a third question that Steph raised, which is whether I don't think you answered, as to whether the events would be in the same place, Div 1 and Div 2, same time.
So I'm sorry that was missed. Thank you very much. As we want maximum flexibility here, as we shared in the past. The idea certainly is that these events could be staged in the same region. They could be overlapping. They could be separate. But it's also our intent, relative to flexibility, to allow the potential for two different hosts within the same time frame to be able to host each. So the whole idea here is to make it more flexible to allow either step moving forward. Again, we could have a host that's interested in saying, yes, we'd like to host both Division 1 and Division 2 because of the economic impact of on a particular city, et cetera. Or we may have the opportunity for multiple hosts for each of those tournaments. The goal here is that we want more members to host events. And right now, history has shown, and I take your point that a part of attracting more bids is to make the host requirements more consistent and more accessible, if you will, to more members. But historically, we have not seen, we have a dearth of proposals to host world championship events. And this proposal is intended to provide additional flexibility such that more members will feel more comfortable about being able to host events because they're smaller and less complex.
And if we only get a host for, say, the Div 1 event, what happens to Div 2 or vice versa? If some country says, I only want to host Div 2, what happens to Div 1?
Well, it's the same situation we're currently in. If we don't get a bid, World Lacrosse would have to step up and identify a solution there. We would not host either a Division 1 or a Division 2 World Championship, just as we would not host our existing World Championship should we had no bidders. Most happened, as we all remember, with respect to the 2018 Men's World Championship. We, in effect, did not have a host for a period of time for that event, and World Lacrosse worked with members to coordinate, I'll say, a rescue bid, if you will, an alternative bid to address that situation. In my view, the same would happen under this circumstance. A World Lacrosse would either facilitate and host the event independently, or it would work to try to identify additional bids in that situation.
And what guarantee would that then be that it wouldn't just end up in the same region year after year as many events seem to happen currently?
Well, Steph, that's the whole point here. Again, we're trying to create a structure that is more accessible to more members to host. And what we have in history is an indication, to your point, that we have not succeeded in that regard, because again, to your point, we're not seeing an equitable distribution of hosts throughout the world. That's a fact today. So what we feel that unless we move forward with some strategic change, we're going to see more of the same. We're going to see more concentration of world championships held in certain areas of the world. And I agree with you. We don't want that. So part of this recommendation is to address that very issue. Leo.
Thanks, Steve. Is it possible that a non-member hosts a championship? An organization that is not a member?
Leo, you've got a lot of feedback on yours at the moment. It's difficult to hear.
I think I can answer that. What Leo is asking, if I may, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
What Leo is asking is if a non-member or a city sport commission or other entity, could they bid and hold on an event, or in or possibly even a country that's not a member yet. But I think where we are at in our bidding process and what we've changed in the bid process is that we will speak to cities, we will speak to sport commissions and other entities that regularly and normally bid on International Federation events. Once we have an interest from those entities, we would then marry them up to the host country of which that city or sport commission resides. So we would still want the host NGB involved on the terms they want to be involved, but we want to make sure that we're expanding our sphere of potential bidders for events and leaving no stone unturned to try and create the best economic return and the widest distribution of events, as Steve mentioned, is possible for our future world events.
Thanks.
Mike.
Thank you. From one Continental Federation point of view, it's interesting to see you're going for 40 countries competing compared with the previous World Lacrosse definition that would be a maximum of 30. But the biggest point is that when we talk about Continental Federation pre-qualification, it does away with all pre-qualification, for example, a previous blue division. And therefore, every qualification event in a Continental Federation is going to be ruthless. It's going to have top countries competing with mediocre countries, competing with new entry countries. And there are going to be in that qualification decimation of some of the competitions. Whereas previously the pre-qualification of blue division did away with that and allowed a far more development perspective when we ran Continental Federation events. So could you please give some commentary to that? Because that really is a concern from a Continental Federation point of view, where we're trying to develop lacrosse rather than necessarily determine the absolute best countries to go through to World Championships.
Jakob, do you want to come in and answer that question, or is it a separate question?
Yes. Yeah, I would quickly comment on that one.
Okay.
So, Mike, thank you actually for raising that point, because this is also something that we have discussed in the group at a variety of instances. So the thing is, and we saw that this might actually be a challenge also with regards to the continental qualifiers, but this is why we actually structured the calendar and saw that as also one part of the proposal to have this one viewed as a whole system. So because if you actually use continental championships that take place every like 2 years before a world event, then you can actually take this ranking from the continental championship, where nevertheless likely every team will play each other, to have this ranking then filling in the spots for division 1 and 2 respectively. So to actually take the ranking that the Continental Federation establishes for itself and then take these countries ranked and put them into a world championship. So if a Continental Federation decides to adopt a different model, and for example, in the Continental Federation Championship, there is played some kind of a blue division, this is nothing that this current proposal would actually prohibit, because it's still up to the Continental Federations how to actually run their continental championships or their qualifiers. But what we need in the end is actually a ranking where this one comes all together. So what is proposed here is, let's take the rankings from the Continental Federations championships and transfer these into a world championship. If continental championships are growing, it might also be actually a model worth considering for continental federations to adopt a 2-division model in the continental championships as well, because these events might also be too big to handle at some certain point, with more member nations emerging at the moment. So there's the system that we propose is actually pretty adaptable, pretty flexible, and can also cater for the needs of more developing nations as well as for developed nations. And we have discussed a couple of different opportunities, a couple of different models, but actually decided to propose this one, as this proposes actually the best compromise of how to identify the best teams in the world, while at the same time offering enough opportunities for developing nations to actually compete. I hope that answers the question to your bit.
Well, Jakob, it raises some interesting points rather than perhaps answers the question. Historically, without going into all the detail, within our Continental Federation, we have tried to develop lacrosse in our region. And to do that, the 2 top blue division countries that we have put in underage teams when we run our regional championships. And that has helped the mediocre and lower, and I don't mean that rudely, countries with lacrosse to compete and learn and develop from both the coaching, playing, and officiating points of view. With this proposal, it's just going to be ruthless. Each team in each Continental Federation is going to put their best team in to qualify for the World Championships in the top 16, ideally. And therefore, any idea of development and learning experience is going to be lost in the competitive part that goes with getting into that top area. So the idea within our region of putting in underage development teams from the top couple of countries will disappear, and they will put in their top teams to the extent of demolishing some of the developing smaller countries. You can talk about having Division 1, Division 2, whatever. At the end of the day, it's going to be who is best out of that region. And rather interesting to watch what is happening with soccer at the moment. They're starting to draw some lines in that area that says we need to make this a far more even competition. So that is a concern from a Continental Federation perspective from APLU anyway.
Thank you, Mike. I would respond to, I agree. The intent here is this is a world championship. The proposal is trying to create certainly a far less subjective qualification criteria for our world championships. We've received, the Blue Skies Working Group, that is substantial feedback from members about the blue division, and not only members, but also the Athletes Commission, about their preference to do away with the blue division at the World Championship level. And the Blue Skies Working Group actually made comments similar to yours about the World Championship. Hey, if we do away with the blue division at World Championships, whether it's Division 1 or Division 2, you're going to have much stronger nations competing against much weaker nations. But that is the feedback that the Blue Skies Working Group has received from both the membership overwhelmingly in our conversations and also the Athletes Commission. And I don't know if Sean wants to comment with respect to the Athletes Commission's perspectives here, but I think, we very much consider the Athletes Commission's perspective here, because after all, these events are for the athletes and they have a particular preference here. So Sean, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that on behalf of the Athletes Commission or not.
Yeah, I'll just support that. I think the ultimate desire is that when you're competing at the World Championship level, you're competing for a World Championship, something that matters, and it's something that is treated by the athletes and by competing nations as the pinnacle of our sport. So it is important that we are striving both at the continental level and at the world level to put our best foot forward, put the best competitors, put the best officials, put the best competition structure and model that allows everybody the equal opportunity to compete and have the opportunity to win. And I think ultimately it's been well said. And thank you very much to the Blue Skies Working Group for all the work that you guys have put in.
Thanks, Sean. Leo.
Sean, I agree with your comment about.
Sorry, Mike. You've had two interventions now. Could we move on to somebody else at this moment, please? We may come back to you, Leo.
I hope you will. Thanks, sir.
Yes, thank you. Does this align with the Olympics format, so to speak?
You haven't by any chance got your phone on as well, as have you?
Oh, my phone, yeah. Hold on.
I think the question was, does this, with respect to structure and format and the proposal for qualifying events at the CF level, does that somehow sync with Olympic qualification? And I think, Jim, probably you're best to answer that question relative to the flexibility that the IOC gives to each sport federation to select its Olympic participants.
Yeah, the IOC leaves that up to each international federation. I think there's two considerations that they do like, which is universality, worldwide representation, but also ultimate fairness for the athletes in terms of how teams and individual athletes qualify for the Olympics. Other than that, it's wide open for each international federation to determine its own qualification systems.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before I come back to Mike? Or comments?
I can just add to what Jim said, and I've run two different U.S. national governing bodies, both that were Olympic, and in both of those, our qualifiers went through continental qualifiers. So it is very much something that many international federations do, have their qualifications go through continental federations, because they want to show that their sport is universal, and they want to show that there's representation from all over the world and not just from a strong continent. So they have continental qualifiers.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands or anything in chat. So Mike, I invite you to ask whatever you comment on whatever you were going to say.
Thanks, sir. I think the fundamental question is, do you want to really focus here on winning Olympic gold medals, or do you want to develop the game of lacrosse across the whole of the world? Because if you focus here on Continental Federation pre-qualification getting into the World Championships, all you're worried about is gold medals for the World Championships and ultimately the Olympics. If not, you should be worrying about how can we run Continental Federation events that develop lacrosse in the region. or for the various countries that are within it. And it's all about the fraternity of the sport rather than the ultimate winning or losing. And sure, we can focus a lot on winning and losing, but you're talking about out of the 70 odd countries we've got, 10% roughly are going to qualify for the elite area that's going to be in the World Games and going to be in the Olympics if and when we get there. So what about the other 90% that need development and learning from the competition they go through against various coaches, players, and team events? And, you know, each sport needs to have a fundamental groundswell that is built that says out of the 100% that are going to be competing, performing and operating in that area, it's only the top 10% that are going to be the real gold medal applicants. And suddenly we seem to be losing that historic part, which was about developing lacrosse as opposed to qualifying for the IOC gold medal game.
I appreciate the comment, Mike.
But pardon me for taking that extension.
Bob DeMarco said he'd like to respond to Mike on development. So Bob, over to you.
Thank you. Mike, I think one thing that we really should look at is we do have development with our U21 or U20, whatever it's a U20 in the future. So we're not discouraging that. Again, I think what we're looking at here is this is the top elite competition in the world, but I don't think it's going to take anything away from development. Things going on behind the scenes there, and again with our U20 events and so forth, our sixes events, I don't see that at all hindering development.
Well, we got to agree to disagree there. Sorry.
Okay.
I would just add, I know David, I think, has his hand up, but I would add, Mike, we need to have a world championship structure that is of the highest integrity, and the world championship is held for a reason, and that is the primary reason is to crown a world champion. So it's true that historically, going back 20 years, world events were used, and associate members were even allowed to participate in world championships, which has created some challenges, as we know. So this proposal, looking forward, is in it to bring greater integrity to a world championship, in this case, world championships. And it's not intended to focus on developing the sport. That, I would agree with Bob, is critically important and should happen around the world championship. Otherwise, I would view, we should just have festivals and not crown world champions. But that's my view. But this is all about bringing integrity and consistency around a world championship structure. David, I think you had your hand up, didn't you?
Yeah, I think from a development perspective, this will bring top down, regardless, it'll bring a lot of exposure to the sport, but it also brings top-down recognition. I mean, I know locally in Israel, an Olympic sport gets way more resources and funding than a non-Olympic sport. And I think it'll also help other countries that are not yet recognized by their Ministry of Sport become recognized by their Ministry of Sport. So it'll be a leapfrog in development from the top down, and that helps from the bottom up, access to fields, access to resources, to being recognized in your community. So what I say.
Appreciate that.
Mike, can I just ask if APLU have considered making a combination event? So you have a qualifier, but you also have another day or something like that, which is developmental for the teams, so that you can embrace both parts of it within APLU? I know, for example, the ELF did in the first time they went through qualifications. We're looking at that as a model, so that they could have their own championship and the qualifier as well.
Well, so historically, you've asked about APLU. We've concentrated on running development events and modified the competing teams accordingly. And we think it works both in terms of competition, socialization, and learning. The way this works is it is rather brutal in that you either qualify through the Continental Federation for the gold medal or you don't. And therefore, we would accept and understand that each country would put their best team in against the best team of any other country, be they a very experienced and capable country through to a newly developed country. Therefore, if you run Division 1, Division 2, it won't make any difference. You're in different leagues, and it can be brutal because a newly playing lacrosse country can be annihilated by a country that's had history and competition and coaching and players that can compete to a far greater extent. So as we understand this proposal, it is just you compete, you qualify, therefore you go through to the World Championships within World Lacrosse. And if you don't, you fall in the ditch effectively.
Mike, understand your point, and thank you for making it. Again, our recommendations made based on feedback we received from many countries and the Athletes Commission who want to play against the best, and they see that as an opportunity to advance and evolve their skill sets. So,
Steve, I understand that, and I accept that. But the Athletes Commission is the elite athletes in lacrosse in the world. And I understand why they want to be gold medal players and winners. However, there is also feedback within the continental federations that this is not a good idea. So I respect the fact you've had some good feedback. Please respect the fact that the continental federation has not had the same.
Hi, Mike. This is Yusuke from Japan, and I don't think it is not a consensus of the APLU. And I think if you assert those opinions, I think you have to have a consensus in APLU, including Japan.
Yep, great.
Jakob.
Yes, I just wanted to quickly respond to Steph's question in the chat. Is like, what is the winner of the D2 will be called? And so this is also something that we have heard from a couple of nations when we discussed, like, can we reduce the events? What is about like international exposure? Because we also heard from a lot of developing nations that exposure at the World Championship is actually key for them to also get like public funding and else. So the question is, if you actually crown a D2 world champion, so it likely be the World Lacrosse Division 2 world champion, right? And so the question is, if you have to obtain public funding from your government or your public authorities, the question is, if you say, hey, I won the silver medal in Division 2 World Championship, definitely sounds way better than I finished 17th at a World Championship. So this could also help actually developing nations to also obtain public funding, because they have a different stance if you actually use it and if you advertise that. And that is something that has already been discussed, that both of the tournaments are equitably marketed and sold and communicated by World Lacrosse. So actually having a Division 2 World Championship, at least from my perspective, is definitely something that is way more beneficial than a 17th or 32nd place at a World Championship.
Yeah, and I can add, I came from cricket, and we had to win World Cricket League 6 to graduate to World Cricket League 5, and had to win World Cricket League 5 to graduate to World Cricket League 4. and that was still, we were 35th in the world as we moved up that path. So this is a model that other sports use to help with development as well, where you have different tiers of teams that can win championships, whether it be 2 different levels of world championships, or in cricket's case, there were 6 different levels that we had to work through to become champions before we could get to a world champion stage.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Leo.
Yes. One last question. Steve, maybe you can hear it. Would it make sense to have the Division II champion qualify automatically for Division I?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Delegation, relegation is something that we've discussed, but we anticipated that would take care of itself, right? Because to some degree, because the qualifiers themselves would enable nations every 4 years to be able to re-qualify for Division I. So that every 4 years, it's wide open again. So we saw that as to your point, yeah, could you automatically advance Division I to qualify, or Division II champion to qualify for the next Division I champion? We did have debate about that, and Jakob can add if he likes. But we thought the fact that every 4 years it's a fresh slate, and every nation has the opportunity to qualify again for Division I or Division II. We thought that kind of solved the issue and simplified it to some degree, rather than automatically elevating the Division II champion to the next Division I championship. Jakob, I don't know if you want to add some thoughts.
Yes, I can quickly add. A system of promotion relegation would also require more competition in between the different continental federations, which definitely is quite cost intensive, and also requires a lot of time in between, while the calendar is already pretty dense, pretty crowded. So to have like a promotion relegation system would be preferable for the far future, but that definitely needs to be like most of the teams, rather professional teams than amateur teams, as we have it in the majority of the members right now. So promotion relegation system as well would then interfere with the continental federations championships. So Steph, that was just an example from a different sport. So in this specific case, the only thing that determines whether you play Division I or Division II is the continental qualifier that takes place before that respective world championship. Only on the senior level, only for field lacrosse. So this is the only thing that we're currently discussing. So the placement where you finish somewhere at the continental championship, this is actually where it determines whether you play D1 or D2. And we discussed extensively whether we should allow anyone to pre-qualify or promotion relegation system. And for practical reasons and also cost reasons, we actually decided to leave it and to rather have a tournament that is quite close in advance to the World Championship, to rather determine who is actually playing in what division. Because what we have seen in the recent past, with a very few exceptions, the competitive level of a national team can change tremendously in 4 years. And so in this case, what we currently have, it's 2 years or maximum 2 years in advance of the tournament. We will likely see the team competing, and their level will be relevant for the allocation of the spot, and then 2 years later. Mm-hmm. So in that case, we actually achieve better competition quality and not have like a team that is 4 years apart being responsible to qualify someone for another world championship 4 years later.
Thanks very much. Nicola has put something in chat. Do you want to speak to that, Nicola?
No, thank you. Sometimes I find it easier to write things when I can actually think what I'm saying, rather than waffling like I normally do when I speak. Thank you, Sue.
Okay, but your point is that this proposal satisfies what many countries could financially do. That's backing up what Jakob was saying in terms of cost and in between competitions. Ibra.
Ibra, you're still on mute if you're talking. Hebrew, if you're talking, we can't hear you. It looked like you had your hand up.
He's gone away. Any more comments or questions before we move to voting? Nope, I'm not seeing any more in chat or with hands up. Can we please, Eric, put the motions on the ballot?
We can, thank you.
Remembering you've got 3 separate votes on the one ballot.
Sue, maybe just a close from the Blue Skies Working Group. Just a brief, again, thank you to the membership. Thank you to the members of the Blue Skies Working Group. You know, obviously these are challenging to finalize with respect to the change they represent, but we're grateful for the engagement received in helping us to develop these recommendations and appreciate all the input we've received. So thanks very much.
Okay, and Steve, thanks very much for that, but also particularly thank you very much for taking on the leadership of this group in 3 different incarnations now over the last 3 years. And thank you for your leadership in this area. It's a huge piece of work. It's
Emails have been queued.
Okay, while we're waiting for the results of these votes, I'm going to suggest we take the 5-minute break at that moment before we move on to the next item. And then we'll get the results and then move on to the elections.
Okay, the emails have been sent. People slowly starting to open them. So Sue, you want to take that 5-minute break back at 37 after the hour?
Yep.
Thanks all.
Did you already register for that test to be picked up? Yeah, so it comes Monday with
Eric, whenever you're back, let me know.
I am back.
Okay, with results?
Don't think it's closed yet. It closes at 37, so it should be closing
Okay.
here momentarily.
Okay.
90% of the votes are in. Okay, it's completed. Admit stuff. Share my screen. There we go. Okay, 10.4.1 passes 36-0. 10.4.2 passes 30-5 for 85.7% of the vote, eclipsing the 2/3 majority. And 10.4.3 passes 27-6 with 81.8% of the votes cast, again passing the 2/3 majority.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to everybody on BSWG for a huge amount of work.
Let me, do you want to go through the vote by vote real quick?
Sorry, yes, please do. Yep, thank you.
This is 10.4.1. 10.4.2. 10.4.3. 10.
Okay, thank you very much. We're then moving on to the election of our first Diversity and Inclusion Director. So Steve, I'll ask you as Chair of Nominations Committee to take this one on, please.
Appreciate that. And again, thank you to the membership for your faith in the Blue Skies Working Group, and we'll work diligently moving forward to assure that your faith is confirmed. With respect to nominations, we did submit the nominations committee. I, on behalf of the nominations committee, submitted a 13-page report relative to the election of a diversity and inclusion director. That report is pretty clear, so I won't reiterate the comments in it. We went through the processes outlined in the report as required, and we identified and received one nomination. We vetted that nomination with respect to the qualifications of the role and felt that the nominee was qualified, significantly qualified in that regard. And that nominee is Sabah Camberlin. And you've seen her credentials, you've seen her CV. The one thing that we didn't include in those that outline of her qualifications, which came up in some of the webinar recently, was, hey, does she have any connection to the sport? And in fact, she does. She played in high school and a little bit of club play in college, and she has at least one child who's actively involved in the sport currently. So she does have a particular passion for the sport and a particular passion for diversity and inclusion relative to lacrosse participation. So the nominations committee submits to you the one nominee that was received, and we believe that she is well qualified for this role and would enthusiastically accept if elected. And with that, I'll open it to any questions about the candidate.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, seconded by Bob DeMarco. Open to anybody. Steph.
Thanks. I think it's really nice, and I think she's eminently qualified in terms of the diversity and inclusion. I was just wondering if somebody could outline her international experience, because I noted all her listed experience was based in the United States. Unless I missed something.
No, I think that's right. No, I don't know that she's had some international clients working with her firm for sure. I don't have those details, but certainly could get them. She is a person of color herself. She is not native to the United States, but I can get some additional detail if that's required.
Just thought that would be something we would like to consider, but I mean, given that she's the only candidate, I don't think we should oppose her in any way.
I appreciate that, Steph, and I'm happy to, following this vote, I'm happy to get that additional detail and circulate it.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions, comments before we move to vote? We're not seeing anything in chat, not seeing any hands up at the moment. Okay, could we then move to vote, Eric, please?
Yep, I'm on it. All right, this one will go out at 45 after the hour. And barring any changes, congratulations. This is the last election buddy vote for the 2021 General Assembly. Emails have been queued. Emails have been sent. Some of you are starting to open them.
Sue, can I just remind people of something while we're waiting, please?
Yes, please do.
I'd just like to remind members that the nominations for the chair of the Rules Committee close on the 19th of November. So if you have any nominations, please send them in by that date. Thank you.
%74% of the votes are in.
If I might, while we're waiting for the results, Ann had posed a question in the chat regarding the rules votes and when they're going to be done. And as you'll recall, we had to park the sixes rules members webinars. So I'm looking to get that rescheduled now. I've gone back to Eric on a couple of dates, which we will be circulating shortly. And I anticipate the rules vote will likely go live around the 15th of November, and it'll be live for 30 days thereafter. All right, so to be thereabouts. I hope that answers your question.
Could you say again the date, please?
Jakob, I'm looking for the rules vote to go live around the 15th of November.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
This should be closing right now. And it is closed. Share my screen. All right. Pleased to report that Saba has been approved 37-0. Vote by vote.
Thank you all very much, and thank you, Nominations Committee, and Steve for processing that for us. We look forward, I particularly, as I've been acting chair of DOC Commission, I'm very much looking forward to her taking up the role and to progressing the work that we've already started. So, right, we're now moving to my closing remarks. As we move towards the end of this General Assembly, we've got one or two announcements that we want to make that will take us further forward as an organisation. So first of all, I'm going to call on Jim for the 2023 dates and location of the Men's World Championship.
So I have that note. Let me look it up. If you want to go past me, I'll pull that back up.
Okay. The World Lacrosse Awards is the second item. So after 2 years worth of work by an awards working group in World Lacrosse led by Fiona Clark, we're pleased to announce that a number of awards are going to be made this year, well, next year, but you're going to be able to nominate people for them this year. This is the first time we've had open nominations for our awards. So this is a new involvement of all of you, as opposed to it just being the board or an individual committee that are putting forward people for awards. So we look forward to your thinking, and thanks initially at this point to Mike Slattery for raising this in the first place a couple of years ago, which led to us creating this working group and looking at our awards structure altogether. So the details are on the website of the 4 awards that we are currently going to make with criteria. So there's a Lifetime Award, which is the retitled Lifetime Achiever, a new award called the Service Award, the Development Award, which has always been there, but is going to be opened up to open nomination, and the International Honorary Officiating Award. So those are up there on the website. The criteria are there, the process is there, and there is a nomination form. Nominations will close on January the 31st, 2022. We will be sending you a reminder no later than December the 1st to remind you that this is an early heads up for you. You will also notice on the nomination form that we have a category that we're considering for a further award, which is Athlete of the Year. This hasn't been progressed as far as we would have intended to, simply because we didn't have World Lacrosse events last year or this year. They're still under discussion, not finally agreed, and no criteria are currently released. So we're not asking you to think about the Athlete of the Year at this stage, but we would make a future announcement if and when those details are agreed. And then finally, under the awards, the ongoing working group, Hall of Fame working group under Rick Mercurio, is due to make recommendations to the board fairly soon on how World Lacrosse could bring forward such an award and make it globally effective, given how distant we all are. And they're hoping that we would be in a position to make some launch of that by 2023. But that's just a heads up on that one. So going back to Jim, have you found the dates yet?
Yes, thank you, Sue. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I had it exactly right. I misplaced my note. The dates for the Men's World Championship in 2023 will be June 22nd to July 2nd, San Diego, California. Again, those dates are June 22nd to July 2nd, 2023.
Thank you very much, Jim. And then I have an update for you on new members. We're in the middle of doing a postal vote, and the closing date is not yet completed. But we can say that at this point, all 3 new NGBs that have been put forward from Indonesia, India, and Vietnam have all received sufficient votes already for there to be a majority in favour of accepting them into membership. So we look forward to their future participation, and it's exciting for World Lacrosse to think that very shortly we will have 73 members. So thank you for your votes on that. And then finally, we mentioned it earlier, the General Assembly 2022 will be Monday, June the 27th and Tuesday, June the 28th. And we would imagine we would have a reception on the Sunday night of the 26th, as we often do. Before I close, I just want to give you an invitation that after my closing remarks and after I formally close the GA, DLAXV have asked if they can make an announcement about their future. Sorry, I've forgotten. DLAXV have asked to do an announcement about an event that they're going to be running next year. So I would now like to thank all of you for your participation, both in the GA and prior to it. It's proved really helpful and really informative this year, and it's been much appreciated. And I now formally declare this 2021 General Assembly closed, but invite you to stay online to hear DLAXV's presentation. So over
Thank
to
you very much, Sue.
Sorry,
thank you very much, Sue.
Couldn't get the word
that's perfect. I don't want to interrupt you in your closing words. So thank you to you, Sue, and thank you to all of the participants that are here and that stay around for a couple of more minutes. So there's one thing that we as DLAXV want you to know about, and this is something that we are going to start and to launch next year, which is called the Germany Lacrosse Convention. And why here? Because we actually all want to invite all of you to attend this event, to come to Europe, to come to Germany, to see first-class lacrosse, and also to see a convention and an event. When is it? If you could kindly go to the next slide. It'll be May 20th to May 22nd, 2022 in Dresden, Germany. So the question is, what do we actually have planned? So we have put this under actually a motto of 4 different keywords, which is play, learn, grow, and connect. So we want actually to bring together everything what the sport is all about. We want to have top games to watch. We want all of you to get the opportunity to learn, participate in workshops, learn from top athletes, referees, coaches. We want you to grow personally, and we want you to take something away to grow the game locally. So we'll have a couple of development clinics. And also we want you to connect at the social area, at the party, directly in the arena, and everything else around. Next, please. Yeah, take 2 more. These 2 are normally just cut off. So when it comes to play, and this is a quick journey through what we have planned for the convention. So play will actually consist mainly of the Nation Cups that we will launch, also in box lacrosse, and of course in the brand new discipline World Lacrosse Sixes. So for women's and men's Sixes national teams. Currently we have 4 teams each confirmed for the respective Nations Cups, but we still are open for applications, or we're still looking for 1 more team to participate in the Cups. So if you're interested to compete against some of the top nations in Europe, please feel free to reach out. So this will actually be broadcasted and produced live and also live streamed. So we want to use that as an opportunity to display first-class lacrosse and also use it as a preparatory event for the World Games, and of course for the box lacrosse European Box Lacrosse Championships in Hanover later that year. What we'll also see is International Generations Cup with U19 and 35 plus speed lacrosse and a couple more. And that brings us already to the next part, which is learn. And in this case, we are trying to partner up with a couple of different organizations, including the European Lacrosse Federation and, of course, World Lacrosse. We want to actually bring you a diversity and inclusion workshop, youth lacrosse workshops, men's and women's clinics, box lacrosse goalie clinics, because that's a big point for Europe for development. And also we want to have and to host an NGB leadership workshop, which is also why we address you right now, right here. So to invite you to discuss, to develop, and to come together to have issues, to use the opportunity to actually meet face to face after a very, very long time. Next, please. When it comes to grow, what you will also see is we will see Intercross there. So we have an Intercross association in Germany. You will also see exhibition games of wheelchair lacrosse. And what we will do is we will give you the opportunity to actually try wheelchair lacrosse and to play it. There will be a couple of world record attempts, live streaming, and a lacrosse documentary featuring this convention. And of course, it's connect with a couple of panel discussions with a classic lacrosse fair, as you know it, the NGB roundtable, a welcome party, and of course the players party in the arena on Saturday. So given the entire program, it's quite crowded already, and we'll also get you an app. So we partner with a startup called Lineupper to actually enable you to prepare your own convention program to then come to Dresden and enjoy the parts that you want to have. So how is all of that going to happen, and where is it going to happen? It will happen at the Energieverbund Arena in Dresden, which is actually a hockey arena that can actually host up to 4,400 participants. And our goal is actually to fill this arena with top games and to get all of you there. How is it going to happen? Actually, not without you. And that's the question why we also presented right now, right today, because the crowdfunding for this one starts at November 3rd. And this is a chance for you to already buy heavily discounted tickets for that one. And we will use that crowdfunding to see whether we can actually host this convention or not. Because of course, in this scope, in this size, and this event is something first of its kind in Europe, I guess. And this is why we want to make this happen. So if you go to www.gerlexcon.com, you will also have an English version of the site. You will get all the info and also the international crowdfunding that will start on November 3rd. So if you're looking for a good Christmas gift or to put something under a tree, this could quite be a good opportunity to have a nice gift, a nice treat. And you can also some nice perks for the crowdfunding. For example, what we offer is presidential fitness in that case from November 3rd. So you can actually challenge the DLXV president for your own personal fitness session and then get on and get him to sweat. So this is what it's all about. Germany Lacrosse Convention 2022, May 20th to May 22nd in Dresden, plus the additional Lacrosse Nation Cups with top lacrosse in Dresden in Germany next year. You're all invited. We would be happy to welcome you there, either for a party, a beer, or just a mineral water, whatever you like, or some good talks and chats and playing lacrosse. Yeah, Steph, good that we did invite the CF Presidents for Fitness Challenge. You're happy to join, and we're happy to have you there. Whenever you have any questions, feel free to reach out, either via email, via social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just address DLXV or address me personally, whatever you have. And when you want to come there and you have an idea that you want to present something there, also feel free to reach out. We are happy to adjust the program. We still have place to get you. So this is what I have for you today. Crowdfunding starts November 3rd. We would be happy to see you already buying some discounted tickets. And that is it. With that being said, back to you, Sue, for some last closing words. And thanks for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much, Jakob, and apologies for forgetting what your title of the event was at the beginning. I think it's very exciting to see an event like this happening in one of the European nations, and congratulations on getting it off the ground. I think it's really impressive, and I'm sure, looking at the chat, lots of people want to know about it. If you maybe through Eric, we could make sure that all the countries get a copy of this presentation after the event. So with that being said, lots of things to look forward to, and I'll bid you all farewell. Enjoy the rest of your day or night, wherever you are. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks all. Take care. Stay safe.